Welcome to the Legends of Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Legends of Boxing Show is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation and MyBookie.ag. If you want to bet on the Super Bowl this weekend, go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the MyBookie.ag banner. It'll take you right to where you need to be. I'm your host for the show, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing really, really well. Excited to be on. Always excited to be on. Let's talk some boxing, Mike.
All right, our guest today was a silver medalist in the 1984 Olympics when I was just a sophomore in high school. That was a long time ago, Virgil. He went on to become the light heavyweight and the cruiserweight champion of the world. Please help me welcome to the Grueling Truth, Virgil Hill. How you doing, Virgil?
Good. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jeremy. Good to be with you guys.
All right. When did you begin boxing?
I started when I was 8 years old. I saw some Golden Glove boxing on TV, and at the time we lived on a farm ranch in North Dakota. And I asked my dad if we'd ever move to the city. Now, a city for me is about 50,000 people, which was Grand Forks, North Dakota. And we moved from our farm to the city, and he came home from work one day and said, "Do you still want to box?" I said, "Yes." Started boxing.
And from there, you ended up having a good amateur background, and eventually, in the Olympic trials, you fought Michael Nunn and beat him. What was it like qualifying for the Olympics itself and beating Michael Nunn, if you remember that?
No, Michael fought at 156 pounds. He moved up to my weight class. Because there was Ronnie Essett and there was Frank Tate at 156. So he came up. He hadn't fought 165 ever until the Olympic trials. So I ended up fighting him. I beat him in the Olympic trials, and then we had the Olympic trials box off in Vegas, and I lost the first night, and I beat him the second night, and that's how I qualified for the Olympics.
Yeah, and making the Olympics had to be a dream come true. And then what was it like walking out into the Memorial Coliseum in Los Angeles for the opening ceremonies of the Olympics?
You know what is so funny is I was cutting weight so hard that, all that was just kind of a blur. I was more worried about, making weight, because you had to make the official weigh-in. If by chance you got to fight that day, it was good. But if you didn't, and you had to fight the next day, you still had to make weight the first day just to get into the tournament. So I was cutting weight hard.
Right, and before leaving for the Olympics, you got sick and got to California. You arrived in California late. You were overweight, if I'm not mistaken, and you had to cut weight really quickly. What was the whole experience like doing that?
Well, it sucked because they had Michael Nunn ready for my spot. They brought him in, so I had to make that official weigh-in, or they were going to slide him into my spot. So it was tough. It was tough, but I made it, and went on to get a silver medal. I lost to a Korean, which was a controversy a little bit, but everything worked out for the best,
Yeah, I think the Korean was when it's Sinjun Sup or Sup or whatever. You lost to him. Like you said, it was a controversial decision, which a lot of people thought you won, including me. What do you remember about that fight?
That part. The biggest thing was I had won the fight 3-2 decision, but then they had a jury that year, those Olympics, and if you had a 3-2 decision, it went to the jury, and they overturned it, and I lost 4-1.
Yeah, you got to love amateur boxing.
I remember standing in the ring, and it took forever, and I was like, oh, my God, I lost.
Yeah, and then... Go ahead, Jeremiah.
No, you can go ahead. I was just going to say that, yeah.
Go ahead then. Say it.
No, well, I was just going to say that how many fighters have we talked to have experienced something similar where, it just takes too long to tally the cards and, they know they've got Yeah, they know they got robbed or something when the scorecards are red.
All right. Oh, absolutely. I just knew it. It was a feeling, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God."
Now, is it rough living in a household where somebody else got a gold medal in that Olympics and you just got a silver?
Oh, who would you be talking about?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think there's actually somebody in your household with a gold and 2 silver, isn't there?
Yeah, she got 2 golds and 2 silvers.
Was it 2 golds and 2 silvers? All right.
Yeah. So it can be rough. Yeah, it's hard to get overly cocky in my household for sure.
Does she wear them at the dinner table if you pipe up?
She wears her medals and I wear my belts.
But yeah,
my wife is she's phenomenal. I mean, she's the best person I know. She's my soulmate, the mother of my children, and she is a phenomenal person. If you ever got to meet her, you would see for yourself.
Did you guys meet at that Olympics?
We met at the Olympics. Funny enough, in the dining hall. She was eating steak and all that stuff, and I was eating a little piece of bread and a small thing of Dwyer's ice cream. Now remember, this is all before all these kind of new diets and stuff broke in, and nobody told us how to diet and proteins and all this and that. So I just took it upon myself to eat a little piece of bread and some Dwyer's ice cream.
Go ahead, Jeremiah.
And eventually after the Olympics, you made your pro debut with the Madison Square Garden. What was that like doing it in the big room?
Absolutely phenomenal. Because at the time, Vegas still wasn't if you've made it, that's where you fight. It was still New York at Madison Square Gardens. It was phenomenal.
Yeah,
phenomenal. I'll never forget it. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
No, I mean, I was also there when they retired that very ring. And they retired the ring, and then everything's kind of switched to Las Vegas now.
Yeah. So when you look at it, your career coming up, you make your pro debut. You fought a lot in Atlantic City. You did what most guys do. You fought some older guys that used to be really good, guys like Marvin Camel, Marcus Geraldo, and then you finally, in 1987, at the Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, you get a shot at Leslie Stewart, who was a really good fighter, and you beat him to become the WBA World Light Heavyweight Champion. What was that night like for you?
Well, I was a 7-1 underdog for that fight. And what people didn't realize is I fought 10 times that year. I was fight ready. 10 times. Nobody fights 10 times. But I had Eddie Futch as a trainer and Freddie Roach. And so, man, I was prepared. I was ready. And I think that they slow picked me, and I remember him coming to the ring and he was boned. He was like ashy dry. That's dry.
Yeah.
Especially if you're fighting someone, that's really dry. And he came to the ring and he kind of laughed at me. And so I was pretty hyped up. And,
you laughed at him with your jab.
Yeah. I frustrated him with the jab and stuff, but I hurt him with the right hand, and I finished him with the left hook.
Yeah, and eventually, you fought a lot in Bismarck, North Dakota, and you kind of staked your claim there. And if I'm not mistaken, even the former Bismarck mayor Bill Sorensen, basically called you the franchise of North Dakota. Whenever you were fighting, it was a big thing. What was the decision like to move to North Dakota? What made you go there as opposed to a place like New York City or Vegas or California?
I'll tell you, it wasn't me. It was the networks. I mean, I wanted to fight at home, but it's the networks that wanted to put the fights on there. Because we had such a big, like Crawford, when he goes to
Nebraska,
when he fights at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. There was the networks that wanted to go there. I mean, you got a bunch of German, Norwegian, Scandinavians, and stuff like that, drinking beer and having a good time.
Yeah, it's a great atmosphere.
It was a fantastic atmosphere.
Were they drinking out of horns and stuff?
Hey, I can tell you this, Virgil. Jeremiah watches way too much of that Vikings series on, what is that, A&E or History?
Yeah, it's History.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you make all these defenses in Bismarck, and then you get your first, which I think would be your first huge fight, which was on pay-per-view against Thomas the Hitman Hearns. Talk to us a little bit about that fight, what it was like fighting Hearns, and I'm sure you learned a lot from fighting him.
Oh, definitely. A little bit of stage fright. It was my first. It was my 31st. It was either my 30th or 31st pro fight, and like my 10th title defense or something like that. But it was the first time I've been on the big stage. We were going from town to town and interviews and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it was kind of my first big woo-wah-wah.
Yeah, and didn't you attribute part of that loss to giving Hearns too much respect?
Yeah, I mean, again, another close fight. If I'm fighting Joe Schmo, I win the fight. If you're fighting a legend and you got to beat a legend, I lose the fight. So, yeah, I mean, there are things I could do differently, of course, but I learned a lot. And then right after Tommy Hearns, I moved to Australia and trained with Jeff Innick and Johnny Lewis, and got myself rededicated to the sport and to boxing, and won a title and went from there.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that, because I've always found that interesting, because one thing about the Australians is it's not they're not consistently producing pound for pound type fighters, but there's one thing that I've noticed over the years of watching them, and guys like Jeff Fennick, Sam Solomon, et cetera, they've got great stamina. From what I understand, they train a little bit differently, but they work really hard in the gym. I mean, can you speak to that at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, it definitely. I mean, it was a different look. They're just tough guys. You know what I mean? I mean, they're Aussies. There's nothing fancy about them. They're just freaking tough. It's hard to explain.
It's the Outback.
They're just they get in there and they just go. If for no rhyme or reason, it's not like it's perfect boxing and, a guy's a counterpuncher and this and that. I was just out there not too long ago and watching a fight, and, it's the same. I mean, they're pretty much one-dimensional guys, but they're just tough,
Right. Yeah, and Jeff Horn, Jeff Horn, the welterweight, is a bit like that too. But in the title shot, you end up fighting a former Olympic teammate in Frank Tate. Was that a tough thing to do?
Not at all. Frank and I didn't actually see eye to eye together, and so, yeah. No, it wasn't that difficult. Yeah, I fought him to get the title, and then I fought him again to defend it right after that, because he ended up being the number one contender. So I fought him twice, back to back.
since you kicked his ass twice, did that mean that you guys settled it, and that basically you were right then?
No, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's totally settled.
Now, my other question, real quick, is you brought up being trained by Eddie Futch and Freddie Roach. You want to talk a little bit about your relationship with those guys?
Well, good relationship with Eddie. I mean, I learned. I mean, I must have heard every story of everything that he ever did. Every time we sat down to supper, we would talk about, fighters and this and that. And then as far as Freddie was still fighting. And what happened there was I was getting ready to fight Tommy Hearns. Or no, excuse me. James Schuler was getting ready to fight Tommy Hearns. And Eddie was James Schuler's trainer. So they brought me in for sparring. So I didn't have anybody in my corner at the time. So I asked Freddie to come down and work with me when we had finally got to Las Vegas. And what had happened was Freddie came in and gave me advice, and I handled James really well, and I got fired and stuff. And then ever since then, I was like, Freddie, come over. But at the time, Freddie was still fighting and stuff. So he was fighting a little bit. That's when he fought Greg Hogan and stuff like that, and helped me train. And then finally turned over to the training part. And then I had Freddie exclusively for a while until I lost to Tommy Hearns. And then he went on to do bigger and better things, of course.
Yeah, and I saw an interview with Freddie, and man, it's been years since I've seen it, but if I'm not mistaken, he attributed his working with you as really kind of a turning point in his career, where he decided, you basically took him to the level where he decided he was going to be a trainer full time. But wasn't Freddie opposite of you in the Bobby Chiz fight?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I almost. Yeah, that's what he gets trying another guy. Yeah.
Yeah. That was really weird. Really weird.
Well, any time I got an opportunity to watch Bobby Chiz lose, I always found it enjoyable anyway.
Look, Bobby is, as far as a commentator, absolutely phenomenal. Sorry. Absolutely a phenomenal color guy. Really bright guy. He did a wonderful job. I don't know what happened there, but
well, he was a good fighter. He just wasn't on the level of Virgil Hill or a Mustafa Hamsho or an Evander Holyfield. I mean, he's a good fighter. He just wasn't that good.
Yeah. He's not a light heavyweight.
Yeah, I mean, he grew up as a middleweight.
He had no business fighting at light heavyweight. Everybody was bigger than him.
All right. Then you go to France, and you actually won a split decision in France against Fabrice Tiozzo. How'd you pull that off? Because it's really hard to win a close fight overseas.
Yeah, well, then I beat the crap out of him then.
Yeah, and you barely won the fight. I think you had one of the judges went 115, 113 against you. The other two were 115, 112. And then the other guy was 115, 110, which was a lot more realistic for you.
Yeah, it was. I knocked him down twice with a jab, with a jab, and then my shoulder popped. And right after that fight, I had shoulder surgery. Right after that fight, but I literally couldn't do anything, hardly, except throw the jab out there. And because of that, I'm not saying that it wasn't a close fight, but we fought, and to get a win in France against a Frenchman, is very difficult. I had to fight him again as a cruiserweight.
Yeah, you actually stopped him at cruiserweight, didn't you?
Yeah, I was a 17-1 underdog, and I was like, "Are you kidding?"
God, who was making
This
those
guy, like,
odds?
5 years ago or 7 years ago, and he was like the toast for the cruiserweights and stuff. And I stopped a couple rounds. I think one first round.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I thought it was a third, but I'm not exactly
part
sure.
of getting punchy is you start forgetting stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
actually, I'm pretty sure that it was a first round knockout because I actually remember watching that fight because I think Showtime showed it. And
Yeah.
I think you stopped him right at the end of the first round because I remember being disappointed because I thought it was going to be a really good fight, and you basically just walked through him.
Yeah, I caught him. Literally caught him. When I would throw my jab, he would catch it and with both his hands. So I hit him with the right hand over the top of his jab, and then I finished him with the left hook. And then when he got up, I went to the body, went to the head, and that was it.
Well, yeah, and speaking of close decisions over in Europe again, I mean, you had a split decision against Henry Mask, and I actually watched that fight yesterday. And Mask was one of those guys. He had a good amateur background as well. I'm not sure if he was a gold medalist, but I know he did pretty well. But he looked like a. Oh, okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. But he was a pretty prototypical European-style fighter, wasn't he? I mean, he looked big and strong, but he didn't really present a lot of movement, and there wasn't a lot of variety in his offensive game.
No, what made Henry difficult is his southpaw.
Yeah,
and the other
part
that made him difficult. The other part that made him difficult is he fought in Germany only. He was their icon. Their Sugar Ray Leonard, their Muhammad Ali. He was their icon.
Yeah, and in that fight, when I was watching the fight, I was really impressed with your footwork and your jab in particular because it looked like what he liked to do was he would try to parry your jab and then counter you with a southpaw jab. But you were doubling up the jab. You were moving a lot. You were making them follow you. And I liked how you're picking your spots with the right hand too. So, because he had that nice tight guard, you would flick your jab upstairs and then bang him downstairs and then, move out of the way. You get him a lot of lateral movement. He tried cutting off the ring, but overall he just wasn't successful.
Yeah, not fast enough. What got Henry is when he headbutted me in, I think it was the 6th round. It split me. I had to get stitched from the inside forward. The blood was just oozing out. Yeah, I barely remember after the 6th round. I think I had a concussion or something because he headbutted me, bam, and all I remember is not where the cut was. The backside of my head hurt. I was holding my head, and after that, I don't remember much of the fight.
All right, then we won't ask you anymore about it. But then you had a huge fight. You did something Roy Jones wouldn't do. You went to Germany to fight Darius Michalczewski. What was your take on Michalczewski as a fighter?
Another guy that did not put the show on the road. So it's going to hurt his legacy. Same with Roy.
Yeah.
Same with Mask and stuff. I mean, Roy finally went to Russia, but I guess he's got a citizenship there, so that's kind of his home too. Is what I heard. Anyway.
Yeah, I've heard a few other American boxers were looking to do that too, and I don't think he ever went to Russia. What'd you say?
Why in the heck would they want to do that? All the Russians are coming over here.
Yeah, I know. It's a weird thing.
The Russians, the Cubans.
Yeah,
even so great here, what are they doing over here?
Well, I would say this. Maybe it's just because nobody over here wants to give a 50-year-old that's getting knocked out all the time a boxing license. That's just my guess off the top.
Look, you can get one in North Dakota because I had my last fight at 51.
Yeah, I remember that. But at least you weren't getting
Yeah.
repeatedly knocked out by guys that shouldn't even be in a ring with you the way Roy has.
No.
And to play
Oh,
off of that, you fought Roy Jones right after that. Do you have I'm sure you have an opinion on what happens if Jones and Michalczewski fought?
well, I think Jones wins. Yeah, he freakish. Yeah, if he can get through, if Michalewski can get through, 6 rounds, then Roy starts to fade a little bit. He doesn't, he goes to more speed than he does power. You got to get through that 5, 6 round, and then on. But I just don't know if he could have got through that.
Okay, and in the battle,
Darius flat-footed. Huh?
yeah, Darius. I've seen a lot of Darius Michalczewski, and his feet looked quicker than Henry Mask. And I want to ask you this because that's a fight that never came off because of TV deals. So it's kind of like Showtime, HBO in Germany. But Henry Mask and Darius Michalczewski never got together because of, again, the TV thing. Who do you think would have won between those two?
I think it would be a close fight, and they're going to give it to the real German.
The ethnic one. All right, so Mask.
The real German. Believe me, that has not changed a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changed, but it's, you can fight there and you're from there, but you're not German.
Yeah, and you retired.
German.
You retired in 2007, and then you came back in 2015, as you said, at the age of 51.
Yep.
What was the reason for that?
Because I was in a car accident with my son, right? He played baseball for the Cardinals, and St. Louis Cardinals and stuff, and in the minors. And we were on our way to take him to camp, and we rolled a car, and so I got injured, and the doctor comes to me and goes, well, your boxing, doesn't say anything other than your boxing career is over and stuff. And I went to him, whoa, wait a minute. Let me tell you something, Doc. If I believe every time someone said I couldn't do something, then I never would have made the Olympics. I never would have won 5 world titles, and I wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame if I believed that. And so it took me 4 years, almost 4 years, to get back into shape and some sort of shape, and to go. And it was a send-off fight for North Dakota. And as soon as I stepped in the ring, I won. It didn't matter whether I, lost or whatever. But I got in there despite what he had to say, and had a wonderful farewell with North Dakota and stuff, and moved on from there. We had almost 7,000 people there, and they were screaming and yelling, and it was a lot of fun.
Then,
but I would not do it again. That was
Why is that?
Painful training I can remember.
Yeah, and speaking of moving on, what have you moved on to? What's
Sorry, Sorry, couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I was saying, speaking of moving on, what has Virgil Hill moved on to? What are you doing these days?
I train fighters and I do promotions. I have a promotion in North Dakota, February 10th. So we do fights, we do pro-am, so amateurs in the front, pros in the backside, and try to help develop some of the kids from North Dakota, native kids, kids from North Dakota and stuff, and giving kids, an opportunity to fight. I have a few fighters that come from Las Vegas that are having a hard time getting fights, and they come on my card and stuff. I train amateurs, and I have 2 pros stuff, so I keep myself busy in the sport. and trying to give back to the sport as well.
All right, so
I'm in the process of trying. Pardon me?
Go ahead.
I'm in the process of trying for USA Boxing. I'm trying to develop a all Native American national tournament that gets a berth into the Olympic trials, as well as the nationals and stuff for an all Native tournament. So I'm in that process. They asked me if I would put that together, and I've been busy trying to do that as well.
All right, so I assume, do you still follow professional boxing?
I don't follow it that much. I really don't. I never did. Shoot, I barely watch my own films. Matter of fact, I never watched my films. So, the top guys I do and stuff like that, I mean, it starts at the amateurs. The quality of fighters are what you're going to see in the pros and stuff. And so the development has to start in the amateurs. And then they progress and go to the pros. And with the old scoring system that they had, didn't do well for our amateurs, and it developed kids differently. And so the quality of fighter is not out there like it used to be.
Yeah, don't you think a lot of that's because the quality of coaching in United States boxing is not as good as what it was also?
Well, but I would say that as well. But I still think that we still have to stay home. You can't tell me that you can't find a good amateur trainer, and you got to go outside the United States to find someone that can train our fighters. I mean, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that everybody wants to come here and fight.
Yeah, you grew up in a time where amateur boxing was never better than it was in the 70s and 80s in the United States. Hell, I remember Wide World of Sports used to show amateur boxing on Saturdays probably 5 or 6 times out of the year. They'd show the U.S. against Cuba or the U.S. against Russia.
Right.
And that's all gone now. And if you look at it,
too bad.
It's just, I think that's where American boxing dropped off. It was the fact that you don't see it on regular over-the-air free TV anymore, and you don't have the Olympic stars anymore because, let's face it, we don't have too many Olympic medalists anymore.
We don't have any. Our medalists are women.
Yeah.
I mean, Shakur got a silver medal and stuff, but so they brought Billy Walsh from Ireland in to redevelop our fighters into Olympic style of fighting.
Yeah, and Ireland's been doing pretty well in the Olympics. From what I hear, Ireland and Great Britain have both invested pretty heavily in their boxing amateur programs, which is part of the reason that they've become so good. But that's interesting. I didn't know an Irish coach was participating in the development of the Americans, but they did do slightly better in the last Olympics.
Look, you ride for the brand or you don't.
Yeah.
Look, you know what I mean?
Right.
If our guys are shitty, then we're going to be shitty. That's my language. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Jeremiah, when we first started doing this show, used to drop the F word all the time, and we've had to keep getting on him.
I just used to carpet bomb it all through shows.
He did. It would be like, fuck, 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 fuck. And we couldn't stop him. Yeah. He was out of control. The only person that cussed more than, him on this show was what? We had Peter McNeely, and the only word you could understand he said was the F word. And then, of course, Greg Haugen. But when you have Greg Haugen. Because I'm like, Greg, you can't cuss, right? He's like, I know. And then in the first sentence, he drops 2 F-bombs.
That sounds like Greg. You got to put James Toney on.
I had James on.
No F-bomb?
James didn't cuss that much. The only thing that got me is I introduced James as like 3-time world champion. And he goes, look at Wikipedia. He said, I won 17 championships. He said, so you need to call me the 17-time world champion. And I just agreed with him, and we got off air, and I'm like, James, like the WBF and the IBAC or whatever the hell it is don't count. And he goes, dog, I got a belt, it counts.
He's probably getting paid to say that. That guy is funny, but one thing he could do is fight.
Oh, he could definitely fight.
He could fight.
Jeremiah?
He fought anybody.
Oh yeah. Tony is one of those guys who could show up. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, just about the only training James Toney did when he was near the end of it. I mean, he's still active, actually. I mean, he holds a title right now, some low level title, which doesn't amount to much. But yeah, he's. I mean, I heard when he was near the end of his career, all he was doing was sparring. I mean, that's all he was doing. He was running a little bit. Yeah, and boy, did he have a mouth on him when he was sparring, too. I saw his I mean, he's had all sorts of tapes. I mean, I've seen him sparring McClellan, and God, who was he sparring? Danny Green, one of the Australians, and he was just giving him a verbal thrashing. But yeah, he used to walk into the gym and, say, hey, let the beatings begin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this guy, yeah. I mean, he gets in the ring and he's at home, like the most calm guy. Bell rings and he goes back to the corner. He looks like just a big blob. Bell rings, he's up and right out there.
What was it? Was it Larry Merchant called him when he fought John Ruiz with a fat tub of goo or something?
He's probably.
And he still won the fight, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, he still whipped Ruiz, but...
What was that?
Larry's lucky he didn't get punched in the mouth. Like someone didn't really hook him up.
On numerous occasions. I still can't believe nobody's, punched Jim Gray at any point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he needs a little bit of an uppercut.
Yeah. I mean, he's offended every sport, so... Larry just offends boxers.
Yeah, he's a horse's ass. Excuse my language.
There's a lot of horses' asses on TV.
Yeah, I mean, there are, but, I'm like, so what is your qualification? Because you have boxing knowledge? You put these guys down and you've never been in the ring yourself? You don't know what it feels like? And stuff? Dare you?
Yeah, and if he was 50 years younger, he would have kicked Floyd Mayweather's ass.
My guess is if he was 50 years younger, he couldn't have kicked Floyd Mayweather's 9-year-old daughter's ass.
Kick your ass. No, you wouldn't.
He only said that because he knew he was almost 90 years old and Floyd couldn't hit him.
Yeah, but he's lucky. He goes like this, well, too bad, I'm going to kick your ass right now.
Yeah, if Floyd would have hit him, though, it just would have been a spot of dust in the ring.
Yep.
Yeah, he'd have vaporized like a mummy.
I think he lost his job because of that.
I think he did, too, because we saw him occasionally for a year or two after that, and then he was gone completely.
Yeah, I mean, why did he give up that money when all you're doing is really nothing?
I don't think he gave it up. I think they took it from him because Max Kellerman and Roy Jones took it.
Yeah, I do too. Because that's when Floyd jumped over to
Showtime.
Did he jump over to Showtime or no?
Yeah, he jumped to Showtime. I don't know if it was immediately after that or not, but I know he did fairly shortly after that. So that might have been why they got rid of him.
Yeah.
But hey,
and he stayed there.
Go ahead.
Whatever.
But Virgil, we want to thank you for coming on the show. And at some point, we're going to do an Olympic show. We got to get your wife on. I'm serious. I mean, when you said that, I looked it up, and I'm thinking, man, she won like 4 medals. That's pretty good.
Yeah. She's awesome. Yeah, that'd be great.
And
her sisters won gold medals with her in a relay or something too, didn't they?
Yeah. And the amazing part is she's got an older sister that is just as accomplished as she was.
Yeah.
Deneen was the baby of the bunch. She had a sister named Sherry that did the same things. She didn't go to one Olympics, is all. But she's a 3-time medalist as well. Yeah, awesome family.
All right. Jeremiah, any final comments or questions for Virgil?
No further questions. I was just going to say that we do have a guy a guy named James Ernest, who has interviewed all sorts of Olympic athletes on our website. So it actually wouldn't be that much of an oddity to get her on or get any of the family on and interview them. But I just wanted to thank Virgil Hill for coming on and giving us his time. It's much appreciated. It's always great talking to guys like him. Well spoken, nice fella. Thanks for coming on, Virgil.
Well, thank you guys, and you guys keep up the good work. We need more of a push from people like yourselves, and you're doing a wonderful job there. And anytime you want me or my wife on there, just give me a buzz. We're on there.
All right. Thanks a lot, Virgil. I want to remind everybody, check out the Retired Boxers Foundation. Check out mybookie.ag. You can download all of the Grueling Truth shows on iTunes. You can get the app off of there. You can hear all the shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Go to gruelingtruth.net. You can hear our interviews that we recently did with George Foreman, James Toney, Mike McCallum, Larry Holmes. So make sure you check us out there. So we're going to wrap it up tonight. And for Virgil Hill, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.